The afternoon sky hung heavy with snow, soft flakes drifting down to cover the streets in white. Maple Street was nearly empty, the sound of passing cars muffled by the thick blanket of winter. At the corner, a small glass bus stop stood, its panels fogged with frost, its bench coated in a thin layer of ice. Emily sat there, her knees pulled close to her chest. Her coat was thin, worn at the seams, and her skirt left her legs bare to the cold. She shivered, pressing her hands into her sides, trying to hold on to what little warmth she had left. It had been weeks since she'd last felt safe anywhere. Losing her job had sent everything crumbling, her apartment, her savings, her sense of belonging. Now she drifted from place to place, her small bag of belongings the only thing she carried. The bus stop was not much, but it was shelter, and she could pretend she was just another traveler waiting for a ride. She lowered her head, watching her breath rise in pale clouds. People walked by, wrapped in scarves and gloves, their faces turned away. No one noticed her. No one stopped. She felt invisible, as though the world had quietly passed her by. Then, faintly, the crunch of small boots in the snow caught her ears. Emily looked up. A little girl stood in front of her, bundled in a puffy pink coat with a gray knit hat pulled over her head. Her cheeks were rosy from the cold, and her mittened hands rested at her sides. She couldn't have been more than 5. Her bright eyes studied Emily with quiet curiosity. A young waiter approached him with a polite smile and led him to a booth near the corner. David slid into the seat, glancing around the diner. He studied the staff carefully, not in a cold way, but with a quiet focus. The waiters seemed rushed yet polite. The cook behind the counter moved with quick hands, flipping burgers and stirring pots. Everything looked fine, at least on the surface. David picked up the menu, though he already knew it by heart. He ordered a simple meal, a cheeseburger, fries, and coffee. Nothing fancy, just the kind of food the place was built on. The waiter nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. As David waited, he leaned back in the booth and listened. The murmur of customers mixed with the clinking of plates and the sizzle from the grill. It was all ordinary, all expected. But then, faintly, he heard something else. Something that did not belong. A sound. It was soft at first, almost lost under the noise of the diner. But as he focused, it grew clearer. A muffled sob, followed by another. Crying. David's eyes narrowed slightly. He glanced toward the kitchen door, swinging open and shut as servers carried plates out. The sound was coming from there, from behind the line of noise and heat. His food arrived a few minutes later, but he didn't touch it right away. He stirred his coffee slowly, listening again. The crying continued, quiet but steady. And then, raised voices joined it. A man's tone, sharp and harsh, cutting through the muffled kitchen air. David set down his spoon. His chest tightened, not with anger at first, but with concern. Something wasn't right. Moving calmly, almost silently, David walked toward the kitchen. He pushed the swinging door open and stepped inside. The kitchen was alive with movement, steam rising, pans sizzling, the air thick with heat and the smell of food. But in the center of it, a scene froze him in place. A young woman stood by the counter, her hands covering her face. She wore a gray shirt and a black apron, but her shoulders were shaking. Her soft sobs filled the air, heartbreaking and raw. Across from her stood a man, also in an apron, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. His mouth was open mid-shout, his face twisted with frustration. The words didn't matter, David had heard enough in the tone alone. The girl lowered her hands for a second, revealing red cheeks and swollen eyes, before covering her face again. David stepped closer, the old floor creaking under his boots. The man shouting noticed him first. His voice stopped, his expression changing to surprise, then discomfort. The girl didn't see him at first, lost in her own grief. David's voice was calm when he finally spoke, carrying a weight that silenced the room. "What's going on here?" The girl hesitated, glancing at the man beside her. He gave a quick shake of his head, warning her to stay silent. But David noticed. His gaze grew sharper, heavier. Finally, the girl whispered, I messed up an order. And, he got upset. I'm sorry. Her apology cut deeper than anything else. Not the mistake, but the fact that she felt she had to beg forgiveness with tears. David turned his eyes to the man. His tone remained steady, but there was no mistaking the authority beneath it. Upset is one thing, he said quietly. But this is something else. The man shifted defensively. She keeps making mistakes. We're busy, and I can't. David raised a hand, stopping him. That's enough. The kitchen was silent. Even the other cooks, who had been pretending not to notice, now turned their eyes toward the scene. David looked at the girl again. What's your name? Sarah, she whispered. Sarah, he repeated gently. Well, Sarah, I see how much this job means to you. Mistakes happen. What matters is learning, not fear. Her eyes filled again, but this time with relief. Then David turned to the man, his voice calm but firm. I'm David Matthews. I own this diner. The words dropped heavy in the room. The man's face drained of color. Even Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. I came here today as a customer, David continued, to see how things were going. And what I found is not what I built this place for. This diner was meant to be a place of respect. Do you understand? The man nodded stiffly, shame written on his face. David stayed for a while longer, watching as Sarah returned to her work. She was still shaky, but calmer now. The room's balance had shifted, the air lighter. When he left the kitchen, his booth held a fresh cup of coffee waiting. He sat again, this time taking a bite of his meal. The burger was warm, the fries crisp. Simple food, done right. He thought of Sarah, her trembling hands, her whispered name, and hoped she would find her strength again. He thought of the man who had shouted, and hoped he would remember the lesson. And he thought of the diner itself, the dream he had built from nothing, still alive and beating in the heart of the town. David finished his coffee slowly, letting the warmth settle him. When he finally stood to leave, he glanced back at the kitchen door. Through the small window, he saw Sarah working quietly, her movements steadier now. She noticed him watching and gave the smallest nod of gratitude. David returned the nod, then stepped out into the cool night. The bell above the door gave one last gentle ring. The town was quiet, the streets bathed in silver streetlight. David walked back to his truck, climbed in, and looked once more at the glowing diner behind him. It wasn't just a restaurant. It was a place of second chances, of respect, of simple kindness. And as long as he had a say, it would always remain that way.